So it does look like we have our gamers getting ready. Cole Voss on the left on creativity, and a name that we mentioned earlier, John Goss. It's listed as 5-color Scapeshift.
Okay.
Which I didn't want to mention this earlier, but he did actually message me about the deck list.
Okay.
He sent me the deck list, and it's much more Scapeshift with Territorial Kavu in it than Zoo. Like, yeah, and it's interesting. He bragged about how he beat Blood Moons with his Dryads. His opponent would just like play Blood Moon, then he play Dryad off his basic forest, and his mana works anyway. So yeah, getting started in the game here. It looks like John won the die roll, played a Wooded Foothills, passed to Cole, who also played their own Wooded Foothills. But John's already got his mana set up there. I believe that's a Zeator's Proving Ground and a Temple Garden off of a Territorial Kavu.
So what is that, a 4/4 or 5/5 on turn 2?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty decent.
Yep.
Like almost regardless of what's going on in Cole's hand, that's a 5/5 is something that's very difficult to deal with. Hopefully Cole has something like a prismatic ending to get that off the board. Otherwise, it's going to be a very short game.
Yeah. One thing that I've been really frustrated with Kavu is that it's like menial graveyard interaction, and I need my Unholy Heat to be on to kill it.
Yes.
And like, if that's something that the Kavu player has in mind as they're attacking with Kavu, you're not going to kill with Unholy Heat.
No, not at all. And I think, one of the big things with these, 4-color, 5-color decks, is the inclusion and the ability to play Red and 6. The fact you can draw a card and discard a land and then get it back up with Red and 6, even if you don't have that fetch land in your graveyard, also just a huge benefit. It's definitely a card that has a very small disadvantage, but it looks like Cole was able to get it off the board, which is going to be good for him long term.
Yep. Fetched a Katria Triumph, fill out the rest of the domain, and then use white mana off Savai Triumph for a binding. And I believe cast it there, just didn't want to get pierced or anything like that. But it looks like John has a Ren and 6, got the Wooded Foothills back, and is sending it back to Cole.
Yeah, and playing around with Spell Pierce, I think, is a really good call. We're just in a spot where I think the card is just so powerful, you got to respect it. If that doesn't resolve because he gets Spell Pierced, I think the game is almost effectively over.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like Cole's just got a Scalding Tarn and sending it back to John.
And we're in the spot now where Cole's going to have some amount of pressure, right? As this game's going to continue going this long, John's just going to be able to build up a lot of pressure with the Ren and 6. So Cole, unless the plan is to just jam Indomitable Creativity into Ren and try to get it off the board that way, which doesn't seem likely, I think you really do need to be proactive here. But I guess it depends on what's in his hand.
Yeah. Ren and 6 really just comes down and makes the game about that card.
Mm-hmm. It's a very easy thing to snowball a game with. You're not missing any land drops. You have a lot of things that you want to keep putting into play. Looks like John's cycling here.
Yep, got a Rogren Triumph from his last turn, and then just used his 3 mana in the main phase to cycle it, a Triumph from his hand, and then pick it back up with Red and 6.
Yeah. It looks... Is that a
Valakut?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so got something cooking here, but I guess you don't have anything else to do with 3 mana. Cycling is not the worst thing. And once again, I don't think the pressure is on John to produce a board state at this point. I think it's on Cole to either have an answer or to, provide pressure himself. So I think that's kind of where we're at. It's probably a good turn to cycle and get the card back if you're John.
Mm-hmm. And Cole also didn't play anything during his turn that could get creativity. So Cole did have to have this Prismari command if he's going to threaten Arcana Cruelty or another way to make tokens.
You do see Spell Pierce and Arcana Grow into the graveyard. It looks like there's a treasure token here. This could be the turn that we're looking for Cole. Getting either a Persist here would be huge. Obviously, Creativity here would be huge. And it looks like Creativity.
Mm-hmm. Off of a Shocked Blood Crypt. We're targeting treasure, and yep. I'm pretty sure John just didn't have interaction, and
yeah, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like you hope that John has something to follow up here, but getting Arcana to play, having to lose your Ren and 6 that you've been trying to build up, and now having to deal with this attack, the next couple turns, this is a 2-turn game at this point.
Yep. Yeah, so John's pressure's really on him to make something happen here, and we're in his main phase.
Yeah, once again, I think John is probably one of the better players in the room. So if there is an answer here, which maybe Omnath is that answer, maybe not, but I think John will be able to find it. But we'll see. I mean, Archon is a hard card to beat.
Yeah, Archon's definitely a hard card to beat. Part of the reason I think that Leyline Binding was immediately a metagame player is that we just have these big bodies that needed an answer. And I believe John drew his card, and we're just having to think about how to get out of this problem.
Yeah, I mean, the bright side is, if John has a fetch, which looks like we have a Windswept Heath, the ability to gain some life, maybe get some mana here, provides you some options here. But once again, if this does not get off the board, it's just going to be another thing that gets eaten by this Archon of Cruelty. So really looking for something productive here.
I was hoping for a Solitude that we knew would resolve right there, but that's a forest, so can't cast Solitude off of our Omnath mana with the forest.
No. Yeah, I'm not sure. For 5 mana at this point, I'm not sure if there's anything. I might be missing something, but I think your options on removal spells are pretty slim. Like it's not like you could, even if you wanted to, you can't cast Fury and then another Fury. I don't think, a 5-color Scapeshift would play that anyways. I think you're in the spot where maybe you have like a Brazen Borrower or something like that.
We're cycling again. So down to 1 mana. I imagine that's white mana.
That is definitely not the show of strength you're looking for. The main phase cycle typically does not say, I've got powerful spells that I can deal with your board.
Yep. John really wanted to be winning that game with Wrenn and 6. That's not in play anymore. Looks like we just didn't use the mana and went back to Cole's turn.
Yeah, so I think this game will be over in short order here.
Okay.
So
with the Archon trigger on the stack, John channeled Beseju, which cannot get spell pierced.
Cannot, no. And getting the Kavu back is not the end of the world. I think it actually is nice to, essentially trade 1 mana spell for the ability to, not lose your creature.
Yep.
Right? I think Omnath is a much important tool if John's going to come back in this game than a Territorial Kavu or a Beseju would be.
Yep. So we see that trigger resolve. John sacrificing the Kavu, discarding Prismatic Ending that is not very impactful here. And Cole drawing a card.
And now that John knows that Cole has a spell pierce, that's probably going to influence how some of the next turns go. That's a card that usually when you catch people by surprise, your title mana. Oh, I don't think it matters. Never mind.
Yeah. That's the second Archon. Omnath's going to go away. John's going to go to 4.
Looks like John said, stop that. That's good strategy there. I like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those cards. It just snowballs out of control. I mean, the first one was bad enough, but adding the second one, like I think the game's very quickly over here.
Yeah. I'm not sure that John's deck has any outs, but he's gonna try his best. Expressive iteration.
If there's one thing John is, it is definitely persistent. So it never.
Probably needed to see a very specific set of cards and didn't see them, and on to game 2. So we have Cole's deck in paper. I'll work to bring up John's deck here.
Because once again, this deck is, I don't want to say wild. It's a deck that I'm looking at. It's like, okay, so we're doing some aggro stuff. We're doing this, and to actually see the fact that it's just Scapeshift is very surprising to me. But looking at it all together, it definitely makes sense. Some really solid cards. We saw the Terra Kavu there. We saw the Omnath. We saw the Wrenn and 6. There are also some copies of Dry to the Elysian Grove, which makes sense in a Scapeshift shell. I actually did see the Chalice of the Void in the main deck, which was when I was watching some games earlier, and that's a card I think is pretty good overall. I don't think it's great in this matchup here, but I do like that card. But I do love the Leyline Binding in general as well. Like you said, there's not a lot of efficient removal spells, so being able to use Leyline Binding to get rid of those bigger spells, maybe a Resolved Archon or something like that, is a really nice tool to have.
Absolutely. And in John's sideboard, it looks like We got some hollowed moonlights that look great here.
Mhm.
I think we'd also be boarding in these engineered explosives. They just work to counter creativity, force interaction. What about extra copies of like Spell Pierce?
I like Spell Pierce. I think
Mhm.
Spell Pierce is a pretty solid option. I mean, you've got enough things that you would want to hit with a Spell Pierce that I think it's worthwhile bringing in. Um, the one I'm kind of interested in is I don't know if you want Leyline of Sanctity.
Hmm.
It does allow you to turn off the ability from Archon, which I think is important.
Yep, does target.
But it is very much a dud otherwise. But you can cast it, right? Double white is not impossible for this deck, especially with Omnath
Mhm.
and all the white sources. So that's something I think I might want to bring in. Another one too is Endurance. Like, how good is Endurance here? Do you think? Like, I obviously you got persisted in that game twice, or well, I guess once, right? The one, other one was like creativity. So, um, there is obviously some pull to wanting to do that, but I don't know if that's even the right call. I think you're almost better just having the Spell Pierces, having the Hollowed Moonlights, and trying to fight that fight.
Yeah.
But I will see what
Mhm.
John decides to do there.
And I bet the Kavus are coming out. I don't think this is the matchup for them. I think they're there to block Ragavans, they're there to block Goblin Guides,
Yeah.
and pressure Murktide opponents. So I think they'll come out because we just want to be playing the bigger game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just committing to the board, making your land drops, and being able to get up to that Scapeshift, which, honestly, I think with this deck, the way it's set up, you obviously know there are some Spell Pierces lurking about, but I think you're able to just cast Scapeshift, have some mana floating to counter a Spell Pierce here, or, pay for a cost there, and be able to win the game like that. Like you said, I don't think that Kavu's trying to beat down for 5 over a couple turns.
Yeah. Looking over at Cole's sideboard, I would think that Alpine Moon is a slam dunk. He did see Valakut from John, so probably can expect some copies of Scapeshift, but I'm not sure about the other cards here.
Yeah, I mean, like there are some copies of like Veil Summer. Maybe you want that. I understand maybe wanting Flusterstorm, but I mean, at this point, unless Cole already knows what John's on, I don't think you're going to bring in the Flusterstorm to try to overtax the Escape Shift down the line.
Mhm.
I think the Veil is maybe fine because John does have some amount of counter magic himself, so maybe the Veil's fine, but there's not a lot here.
Yeah, just really trying to put Archon in play and attack with it.
Yeah. Alpine Moon is definitely a card, though. I think Cole is happy to have, though.
Yeah.
That's turning off the Valakuts would be huge.
So I believe that we saw Cole take a mulligan, finishing that process here. And then we are getting started with game 2, and John did bring in Leyline of Sanctity.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I mean, the game is going to die one way or another to Archon if Cole has his way. So being able to shut off the activation, the trigger of that, I think is a huge step for John being able to last more than 3 turns, 3 attacks.
Yeah. So first turn getting finished up here. John's getting a Savai Triome, and Cole had played a Scalding Tarn.
Doing the thing you want to do. I mean, no action on Cole from turn 1 allows you to fetch up a Triome that gets the colors that you want. So hopefully John has a pretty solid turn 2 play to add some pressure. And that seems like a good one. Oh, seemed like a good one.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's that Spell Pierce. Very impactful getting the Ren and Zix. As we saw, Cole needed to interact with that once it had resolved last game, and don't need to do that anymore.
No, and if you're Cole too, you're trying to get mountains anyways. So being able to actually use your mana on turn 1 with the Spell Pierce is a huge step in the right direction.
So over to Cole's turn 2, Wooded Foothills, and a pass back.
Like because the Ren 6 is on the board, I mean, both John and Cole are really just waiting to pick their spot. What's the best place I can interact? If we're just going to keep making land drops, obviously that's going to advantage John, but being able to, okay.
Yeah, Dryad into our second land drop for the turn, getting us all of our colors of mana. We played a Plains and then a Steam Fence.
So that's definitely gonna looking forward now that John does not have to worry about things like do I have the right amount of colors or whatnot for my Omnath? Next turn an Omnath could be a really huge boon, especially since you're being able to make 2 land drops. That could be massive if that happened to be in John's last couple cards.
So moving over to Cole's turn, we see him play a Wooded Foothills, quickly put it in the graveyard, and looks like we got an action. I'm expecting a Teferi to bounce the Dryad.
Teferi would be a solid play. I mean, and I think long term you eventually want to be able to pick up that Leyline of Sanctity. So I could actually see wanting to pick that up, but once again, you can just recast it very easily here, so that seems kind of loose. I think getting the Dryad off the board. Oh, is that a prismatic ending?
Yep. Whole way to exile. Not messing around with that anymore.
But that does make if there is a Teferi Time Raveler in Cole's hand, that does make that a little bit more viable, right? Because it does look like John has the mana to recast it. But it's still a 4-mana play, takes up a turn.
Does look like John has at least one Kavu in his deck. So we're playing that off of our Triome in Forest, and then another Triome tapped, sending it back.
And honestly, that's not the worst here, just because I think if you are playing the creativity deck, there's a lot of incentive not to be blocking with your creatures. I mean, obviously we've seen different versions that we're playing, like the O3 Crab. We were seeing versions, obviously most of them are playing the Dwarven Mind to go get the 1/1 that you can creativity away. But there's a lot of incentive not to block if your creature's going to die. So I could imagine this actually being a really good spot for this 5/5 Kavu, gets the red and 6 off the board, hopefully. Being able to pressure the life total past that. Not a bad idea, especially in the play.
Absolutely. And as you said, Cole played a Ren 6, got the land back, put it in play, and we're over to John's turn. John will play his own Ren 6.
Now we're kind of seeing this advantage engine, at least for John, I think, starting to snowball. I think at this point, unless you have Scapeshift in hand, you don't necessarily need to get up to 7 mana. But being able to pick up a land and then use the Kavu to discard that and draw some actual action here, I think is going to be a really huge benefit in John's favor.
And Cole still not threatening to do his thing. There's not a token in play. There's not, anything like that. Cole's definitely on the back foot. Playing a Leyline Binding there, hopefully protecting his Ren and 6 from the Kavu.
It's a really interesting spot because John had the access to the extra land, was able to play this threat here, but still might have mana available for something like a Spell Pierce.
So we're, I believe, casting Leyline Binding in response to the binding trigger, and then putting the binding under John's binding so that nothing ever leaves play.
Yeah, that's a really interesting interaction. I'm used to like the Oblivion Ring effect, where you have 2 different triggers that are not tied together. So if you remove the one in response, it's just gone forever. The new templating, I think, is a little bit more effective for that kind of counterplay, though, where you're able to prevent the initial effect from ever taking effect by exiling it before, so it never actually leaves play, which is huge. And in this situation, be able to knock out a red and 6 here. Being able to loot away that wins upkeep that Ren and 6 added back to the hand, that's a really huge play.
And Dwarven Mind being able to be fetched with land, making me look a little silly, saying there's not a token in play.
I mean, honestly, that's the thing that I think is really good about creativity. It's just hard to miss, or it's very easy to miss these little bits of information where they're, like, how could they possibly kill me from here? They don't have a creature, they don't have a land, they don't have, and then suddenly, because of a Prismari command, getting a treasure token, or essentially getting a Dwarven Mine off at the end of the turn, it's very easy just to have enough pressure or enough resources to actually put that creativity into play and turn that into a win.
So we saw that Dwarf come in for 1, ping John's Ren and 6, and then Cole played it in Alpine Moon. I believe the Scalding Tarn came down in main phase 1, and then sent it back to John.
And I think the Alpine Moon coming down here, I'm assuming naming Valakut here
Mm-hmm.
is gonna make John's life a little bit more difficult. I think John has a pretty good advantage here already, just being able to be attacking with this 5/5, having the run at 6, which is going to be able to pick off the Dwarven Mine token. Discarding the second run. But I think John's definitely in the driver's seat here. But I think that does at least cut off some of the ways that John could win if this game goes sideways.
Yeah. Yeah. So John attacking with Kavu. As you said, discarding second copy of Renin 6, picking up another card, and then casting an Omnath in his second main phase.
Yeah, Cole's got to be feeling real bad now. This game could be over very quickly. Once again, I think it's already an uphill climb with Kavu and Renin 6, but if that Omnath comes into play, we're in trouble.
Absolutely. So it looks like we're responding with Prismari Command, looting, and probably making a treasure. Discarded at least one Archon.
It looks like it might be 2.
Yeah, I believe so.
So, I mean, obviously the Leyline of Sanctity is shutting off those triggers, so that is something that you have to be worried about if you're Cole. But, I mean, I think even getting, persisting, getting back 2/5/5 bodies, I think that might be enough to hold up the board, at least for a little bit. Obviously, I think John has the ability to find enough resources and, with a 5/5 Kavu, being able to attack through and kind of whittle down the board. On Cole's side, I think there's a lot of incentive just to try, if you can, at least to, I guess, pick up. Like Cole wants to pick up the Leyline and then attack in one turn cycle. That might be enough to turn off the game, but that's going to include a Teferi. That's going to include an Archon staying on the battlefield for an attack. It's asking a decent amount.
Yep. So John did draw the card off Omnath, play Windswept Heath, gain some life, pass back over to Cole. Cole made another Dwarf off the Dwarven Mine. And we're in, I believe, his main phase.
Cole's definitely slowing down for a second to try to make sure I'm making the right play. I mean, I think at this point, almost anything you do is going to be game over one way or the other. But if you have a chance, you got to try to look for it. Looks like we didn't find it, though.
Yep. So scoop it up and move on to the next game. Really stuck out to me just the play draw there. And I mean, even through Cole's Spell Pierce, yeah, John just went into his next turn, played a Dryad, got another land, we're up mana now, and yeah, just really ran away with that game.
Yeah, I think especially with these two decks here, I think having to play defensively versus aggressively puts a lot of strain on the matchup because you want to be providing these answers and progressing your board state. But when you have to deal with these kind of must-answer cards, the Renin 6s, the Dryads, the Omnaths, it doesn't allow you to actually, contribute, right? And this is a weird deep cut. But if you've ever done debate, one of the things that ends up happening a lot is when people are getting into debate, you'll have somebody who is talking and they make a lot of points, and the other person just wants to initially go and say, okay, well, that's wrong because of this, and that's wrong because of that. And what ends up happening is that they will spend their 3 minutes not actually putting forth any points, but just defending and trying to make sure the other person doesn't win, which doesn't allow you to win, right? And eventually, like you kind of see in this game, you're able to put through enough threats in the other person's, regardless of even if they're answering things one for one, they're eventually going to run out of that ability to answer things. Their cards aren't going to line up nearly as well as they were before, and suddenly you're on the back foot in a really bad position.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice metaphor to illustrate that there. That was beautiful.
Yeah, I try to put in as many debate references as I can. It's hard, but I mean, when the moment calls for it, you show it in.
Yeah. So players getting shuffled up for game 3. I believe Cole will be on the play after losing game 2. And we'll see how we get started here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Renin 6 math kind of changes here with Cole in the play, being able to hopefully get that down first, hope that John does not have a Spell Pierce, or even if he does, it maybe a tap lane prohibits him from actually casting it. I think a lot of the game doesn't necessarily hinge on that card, but it definitely goes a long way in deciding who's the winner.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cole kept 7, and John sent his back.
Which obviously, like, you want a playable hand here, but I think the first 2 games here kind of show that this is a very resource heavy game, right? You're trading a lot of resources back and forth. You need to make sure you're in a good position before you try to, go for your Scapeshift, go for your Indomitable creativity or your persist. So I think being down on resources, especially on the draw, is going to, be a factor here.
Absolutely. So we see John tuck one away, and Cole gets started with a Roggen Triumph.
And you can probably see there's a Spell Pierce sneaking out of Cole's hand. So even if Cole decides to play a tap land on turn 2 here, you're still in a really good position to be able to counter anything threatening from John this following turn.
John played Wooded Foothills, passed back over to Cole, and looks like Cole's thinking, playing a Wooded Foothills, and back to John. Love this nice song and dance. Just kind of put your lands in the graveyard, get the ones you actually want. First couple turns, maybe play a Wrenn and 6. Yeah.
I mean, once again, eventually someone's going to have to go for it. And, I think this, in a lot of ways, is like those kind of control mirrors where if you are the first one to go for it, you're going to be at a disadvantage. Your opponent gets to untap and then cast whatever they want without interruption from you, which I think is obviously something that could turn the tide in this game. I mean, an uncontested Omnath and uncontested creativity usually is going to be game over.
Yep. So, like you said, we see players leave the shields up and land pass.
I do think the nice thing for Cole here is that once you get access to the Dwarven Mine turns where you can fetch and get Dwarven Mine, you have a way to actually add pressure to the board without having to necessarily pay mana.
Absolutely. As well as I think Cole has more instant seed spells to cast in John's end step.
Yeah, the Prismari command, kind of the big one I think that's going to end up coming and being a big factor here, especially if we're going to continue to draw go scenario.
Yeah. Look, one more is more.
Yes, that is true. It's very true. That's math right there.
That's it. Yep.
And I think now that Cole has this Wrenn and 6 here and still has that Spell Pierce available, maybe we see that here.
John does go for the Leyline Binding. And Cole does look like he's prepping to cast a Spell Pierce. I wouldn't be surprised if if very conscious from John to, I need to get this Spell Pierce out of the way anyway, and don't want to play through this Wrenn and 6, so here's my 2 Leyline Bindings to eat your Wrenn and 6. Because as you said, he'll get to untap now and have a turn.
And being able to hopefully, have a threat to put down here or have multiple answers to make Cole's next turn, very awkward or unproductive in general, I think goes a long way too. But you have to hope that John does have that second removal spell for that Wrenn and 6, because the advantage of just being able to draw and discard through that is going to very quickly end this game, even if it is just plussing until we can get to that ultimate ability.
Oh yeah. And if we don't have the answer, it makes going for the Leyline Binding there like just a little risky.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it looks like we're getting a Dryad at least, but I mean, that's not going to be able to pressure Wrenn and 6 like I think we want to, unless there's like a Lightning Bolt also in John's.
We did play a Steam Vents and pay 2 life to have it enter untapped and pass it back. So
I'm gonna call sus there. It could be anything. It could be a boat, but it's very sus either way. I'm expecting a Spell Pierce here. I wouldn't be shocked if it was something like, I guess it could be like a Veiled Summer, but I don't think we're in really a spot where that's a card I'm willing to hold up. But I mean, interaction is interaction. Honestly, even if John doesn't have anything, the fact that representing those cards, I think, still has a meaningful impact on this board.
Absolutely. Makes Cole think as he plays the Wooded Foothills there.
Now we're up to the Dwarven Mine, ability to have that trigger. So this also is going to have another way to kind of pressure the board in one way or another, right? I mean, now that John would have to be at least aware that Cole can threaten Indomitable creativity. So that is definitely something to worry about, even if you do have a 2/4 blocker for now.
No Leyline Sanctity this game, so. John casting Omnath, Locus of Creation. Resolves, draw a card.
Which we start pairing that with your Dryad. I mean, that provides a lot of manage and pressure. I mean, the ultimate being able to actually just deal for a lot of places on Omnath, I think might be a quick end to your Ren and 6, but also just a huge mana advantage. The 4 free mana here could go a long way in getting John a win here.
So John played a Windswept Heath, gains 4, and like you said, if we have any other land here, with our fetch land, we can deal 4 and then attempt to attack the Ren and 6 to kill it.
And the nice thing about that too is that it's not, you don't have to worry about something like Prismari Command, creating a blocker. I mean, you do have the access to have Dwarven Mine, make a Dwarven block there, which would be worth it, I think, depending. I think you need to keep Ren and 6 alive if you're Cole, and I think if we're going to have this trigger come to play, or the trigger from Omnath when this land comes into play, you definitely need to keep your resources alive.
Yeah. So getting a shock land there. 4 mana. Using the blue and the red to cast an Expressive Iteration.
I mean, cards are cards here, so I think anything that comes into play, you'd be happy with. A fetch would be really nice, actually, just because it allows you to have 1 land for this turn. You don't have to crack it even, and then you could save it for your next turn and already be a land up.
Yep.
I'm not sure if there's any other card you'd be hoping for. I know John doesn't have access to anything super damning. I think Leyline Binding would be really nice. I think Prismatic Ending would also be more than fine here. I think land. Ooh, Expressive Iteration. Okay. That seems like an odd exile, just because I don't think I guess John has access to at least 1 color of mana, but I'm assuming there's going to be another land coming from John's hand, so we can actually cast that Expressive Iteration.
Right, or that iteration was just really bad. We really wanted to hit our next land off of it, and we didn't, so this was the card that we threw into exile.
I mean, the number of times I've cast Expressive Iteration and then hit Death Shadow that can't actually survive, Murktide that I can't cast, and Fury that I don't have a red card for has been very high. So I could imagine that being an issue for John here. But I mean, ideally, it looks like John's trying to put a land into play tapped here. I guess that Expressive Iteration is just going to end up staying in exile. Not.
Rogrin Triome, triggering the Omnath again. Ren takes 4, Cole takes 4.
And just having the ability to make your opponent have to decide, am I going to lose my Ren and 6 to this Dryad, or am I going to use my, something I need to win the game, a token, to keep my Ren and 6 alive, really puts you in a tough spot.
Yeah. John attempting to attack Ren and 6 there. Cole casting Prismari Command after the attacker is declared.
So Prismari Command, I trying to think of the modes on that one. I mean, I know it can destroy artifacts, but I don't believe it can destroy enchantments.
Correct.
So I'm assuming looks like we're obviously looting here. Are you making a treasure here? Are you hoping to
find interaction?
I mean, I think it also might kind of influence your plays too, because if you have the creativity, if you see the creativity off of the loot, maybe you don't actually block with your token. But if you don't find it, maybe that ends up being the thing. Well, let me keep this token, use my token to block this, so I can get another card deeper. Something they're gonna have to deal with next turn, and once again, try to hopefully extend this game out a little bit longer.
Yep. But it does look like we got a Sacred Foundry. So no Dwarf coming in.
Which, I mean, this could be good, this could be bad, right? This might be a matter of, oh, the Leyline Binding, yeah. So there is some interaction here, which is good, and that is something I think nice, being able to deal with some of these cards permanently. And I do think there's a lot of incentive to want to get rid of the Dryad, but I think Omnath is a card that you have to worry about more long term. So I'm not sure which one you try to get from Cole, from John. I'm actually leaning towards letting the Ren 6 hit the bin and getting rid of the Omnath if I don't have the creativity. But if I do have the creativity in the land, I think I'm just going to get rid of the Dryad. That way I can put the Omnath in the graveyard off the trigger from the Archon.
Yep. Sounds like a good plan to me. We'll see if that plays out for Cole here. And it does look like the trigger will target Dryad, saving Run at N6.
You've got Run at 6. You've got 4 lands. Looks like, at the very least, you have access to a fetch land if you want it or need it. And more importantly, John's tapped out. So this would be the turn that if you have that creativity, you just jam it here.
Yep.
You can really only hope if you're Cole, but if you don't have it, John's gonna untap, and I can't imagine that Ren surviving any more turns.
Yep. But looks like Cole does not have it here. Passing back.
Yeah, not what you want to do if you're Cole.
Yep.
But I mean, you play with the cards you have. I think if you end up losing your Run 6 here, it's not the end of the world. Right? There are definitely more threatening situations, spots you could be in. But if John has any kind of follow up here, whether that is another Dryad to make additional land drops and trigger Omnath for that 4-ball at the end, or honestly, even if it's just a matter of another creativity to dig a little bit deeper in the deck, you have to be worried if you're Cole here.
Cole fetching a Dwarven Mine, getting a Dwarf.
I mean, after this game, we need to talk to Cole about getting some sweet dwarf. I mean, I'm okay with the normal, let's get this 1/1 from Throne of Eldraine. Look at that dwarf, the red one. But you can get a Gimli token, right?
Ooh,
that'd be sweet. I'm on board there.
Yeah.
I mean, you could even get I was edged towards Pokemon tokens.
Yeah, that's my thing too.
Yeah, so yeah. I could imagine. I don't know what you would want. I would think the trio is kind of what I'm thinking of.
Okay. Yeah. Mining. Yeah, I like it.
But each their own. Right? Oh, okay. So we do have the creativity.
John's got a Spell Pierce.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that land was a Temple Garden. It must be a Breeding Pool.
Yeah, those all look very similar to me every time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you have second counterspell.
Yep, second Spell Pierce after Cole paid 2, I believe.
All right. Well, I mean, that could have very easily just been the game there, and now we're in the situation where, I mean, John's still in the driver's seat, but not nearly as advantaged as he was before.
But I was thinking, Cole's life total is pretty low, so no, we're not going to trigger Valakut at all.
No.
We just need to put 3 lands in play.
Doesn't matter which one. Pick the ones you want. Pick your favorite art.
3 fetch lands.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So Cole does then die to an Omnath trigger.
Yeah. Which, I mean, to be fair, we all die to Omnath.
Yeah.
It's just a way of life. You start at birth, you end with Omnath.